Section number 24 of the Mary Frances storybook, Patty and Her Pitcher. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recorded by Alan Lawley. At the end of the story lady paused a moment and then said, "We will now leave the cold and snowy world and come back to our warm and pleasant fairyland and to the story of Patty and her pitcher." "This is the delightful surprise I spoke of," said the Story Queen to Mary Frances. "Just watch the magic circle." Mary Frances noticed a large circle drawn on the carpet, about which all the story people were grouped. "You are going to hear the story and see it acted at the same time. The story lady will control the action with her voice." Part 1. Mary Frances sat listening entranced to the voice of the story lady. It flowed on and on like sweet music, now rising, now falling, filling the ear with charming sound, and the imagination with a perfect picture of the story she was telling. The story began. The most charming little girl in her native village was Patty. At the words "a little girl," Patty, not much bigger than Tiny of Tinytown, sprang up in the circle with a little home and the village all about her. The pigeons flew down to coo around her, and they flew down and cooed. The chickens fed from her hand, and the chickens came running. The cat rolled over her feet and purred, and the cat did it. The steady old dog, Bluff, cut his liveliest capers, and Bluff did it. As the story fell from the story lady's lips, there was an instant obedience in the village of the magic circle. The characters obeyed the voice instantly, just as the feet of children dancing obeyed the music of the piano. So the story flowed on. The acting kept pace with the voice and did everything the words said. Mary Frances sat spellbound, for she had never seen anything so beautiful as the way in which that wonderful voice brought every player and every action to her ears and eyes at the same time. This is the story. If you keep your eyes on the magic circle, you can see it as Mary Frances saw it, through the veil of words. Part 2. The most charming little girl in her native village was Patty. At least, so all the neighbours said, and what everybody says ought to have some truth in it. Patty deserved their kind words, for she loved everybody and everything, and in return she was loved by all who knew her. The pigeons flew down from their little house to coo around her. The chickens fed from her hand, the cat rolled over her feet and purred with pleasure, and even the steady old dog, Bluff, put himself to the trouble of cutting his liveliest capers to attract her attention. Patty was always busy too, about something. When she was no higher than your knee, she used to bustle about and do little things in the handiest manner. And as for sewing, she was the pattern child at the dame's school, where her sample was hung upon the wall as a guide to the other children. She lived in a little cottage with her parents, who were now old and very poor, and depended upon their little daughter for many things which they were too feeble to do for themselves. One of her daily duties was to go to the spring for water. She would dip her pitcher into the clear bright liquid and sing her sweet little songs, with a voice that made everyone who passed that way stop to listen with delight. Upon one of her journeys to the spring occurred the great event of her life, of which I am now about to tell you. Patty had filled her pitcher at the spring, and was carrying it home with some little difficulty, for it was quite heavy when filled. When almost in sight of her cottage, she saw a poor, old, travel-worn woman sitting by the wayside as if overcome by the fatigue of a long journey. She sat upon the trunk of a fallen tree. Her face was as brown as a nut, and covered with a complete network of wrinkles, while her dim eyes looked dull and sunken. At her back was tied a bundle which seemed quite large enough for a strong man to carry. She watched Patty as she came near, and cast eager eyes upon the water in the pitcher, which seemed so cool and tempting, and after looking at Patty's rosy, good-natured face, she asked for some water. "Dear little child," said she in a feeble voice, "give me a drink from your pitcher, for I am very old and faint and weary." "To be sure, mother, and welcome," said Patty sweetly, as she raised upon the pitcher so that the old woman could drink. Long and eagerly did the poor creature drink of the delicious water, so long indeed that Patty was much surprised at her extreme thirst. "Thank you, my darling. Heaven will reward you for your kindness," said the old woman. "Oh, you are quite welcome, mother," said Patty again, shouldering her pitcher and going cheerfully on her way, singing in the lightness of her heart at the pleasure of having relieved the poor woman's distress. But she had not gone far before she was overtaken by a large dog, who seemed to be bound upon a long journey, for he was covered with dust, his eyes were bloodshot, and his parched tongue hung from his mouth to catch the cool air. "Poor fellow," said Patty in a kind voice. The dog turned around at the words, and stopped to look at her. She held out her hand, and he came nearer. She then sat down her pitcher to caress him, but he strove eagerly to reach the pitcher, which his instinct told him contained water. Patty understood his wants, and held the pitcher to the poor dog so that he could drink with comfort. He lapped and lapped until she began to think he would never leave off. At last he looked up into her face and licked her hand in gratitude. Then, after bounding and gambolling about to show how refreshed he was, trotted on his way. Patty now looked into her pitcher and found that it was more than half empty, so that she must take all her journey over again, for it was of no use going home with a pitcher but half full. As she rose, she saw some harebells by the side of the road, which appeared to be in a very drooping, dusty state, so she at once poured over them all the water that remained in the pitcher. Then, with her pitcher once more upon her shoulder, she turned her steps again toward the spring, without a single regret at the double work she had to do. She travelled blithely on over the dusty road, cheering the way with her sweet songs, and soon arrived once more at the margin of the spring. Resting for a few minutes in the shade, she gazed sleepily at the bubbling water, and all kinds of fanciful thoughts passed through her mind. She was just dropping off into a little nap when she thought she heard someone call her by name. It was a sweet little voice, and Patty could hardly distinguish it from the tinkling of the spring. She rose quickly to her feet and looked in every direction for the owner of the voice, but in vain, till suddenly casting eyes upon the spring, she saw to her amazement a dear little face looking up at her from the water, and presently stood there before her one of the most beautiful little creatures Patty had ever seen. She balanced lightly upon the surface of the rippling water, where she seemed to stand with the same ease as Patty did upon the land, and was really no higher than the pitcher. "So, Patty," said she, "so you have come back again, my dear." "Yes, madame," replied Patty, who, to say the truth, felt somewhat alarmed. "Yes, madame, because I know all about it," said the fairy, "for it was a fairy, you know, and it is because I do know that you see me here, for I am now come to make you a useful present." "A present?" said Patty, with a pleased surprise. "Yes, and such a one," replied the fairy, "as will be the lasting reward for your goodness of heart toward others, and your little care for yourself. You blush because you do not remember the many kind things you have done, and I am the more pleased to see that you think I am giving you unmerited praise. That you think so little of all the kind actions which are the ornament of your life assures me of the purity of your motives, for it is our duty to forget the good we do to others, and to remember only the good that others do to us. You have always done so, my dear Patty. To reward you, I will place a spell upon your pitcher, which will always be full of water or milk, as you may desire. It will also be able to move and work whenever you wish it, and will always prove your firm friend in any trouble. If it should, by any mishap, be parted from you, it will easily, by its magic powers, be able to find you, and in whatever position you may happen to be, you will always find it by your side, as adviser and friend. So put your pitcher on the ground, and look into it." Patty did so, and to her surprise saw the bright water gradually filling until the pitcher was full to the brim. When she saw it was full, she tried to lift it, but found it too heavy for her strength. "You need not trouble yourself to carry it," said the fairy, smiling. "It will save you all further trouble on that score." She then touched the pitcher with her wand, when, to Patty's greatest surprise, two very well-formed legs grew out of the bottom, and a pair of neat little arms appeared at the top of the vessel, which, as soon as it was firm on its legs, made a very polite bow to Patty as its future mistress. "Now, Patty," said the fairy, "follow your pitcher, and you cannot possibly go wrong." And as she finished speaking, she gradually faded away, and at last broke into 1,000 sparkling drops, which mingled with the bubbling stream, and were soon borne away on its bosom. Patty rubbed her eyes as if to make sure that she was awake, for the whole thing seemed to her like a wonderful dream. She coughed aloud, and at last began to pinch herself until she found it painful, when she finally concluded that she must be really awake. But more convincing than all, there stood the saucy brown pitcher, firmly upon its sturdy green legs, with its toes turned out in the politest manner of the day, and its little fists planted in its sides, in a style that was very businesslike indeed. "Quite ready to start, mistress?" said a little voice that made Patty jump, for the fairy had not told her that the pitcher could speak. But screwing up courage, she said, "Come on then, pitcher," and set the example by starting off into a run. And didn't the pitcher follow her in good earnest? Indeed, it ran so fast that it soon overtook her, and not only that, but it ran beyond her long before she got halfway home. But the most surprising thing was that, although it hopped along with the most wonderful strides and jumps over the rough places in its path, it did not spill one single drop of water in its progress. This puzzled Patty, who, with her utmost care, could never avoid wetting her dress whenever she had tried to run with the pitcher, even half full. "What will people think when we get into the village?" thought Patty, as she looked at her strange companion. "I'm sure they will be frightened. And what will father and mother say when they see what I've brought home with me?" "Do not trouble yourself about that," said the pitcher, who seemed to know her thoughts. "Your parents will soon get accustomed to me, and be much pleased when they see how handy I am, for you do not yet know half of my good qualities." As he was speaking, they came to a very high stile. "Shall I help you over?" said Patty, thinking of his short legs. "Oh dear, no," said the pitcher. "See how little I need it." And, so saying, he skipped over the stile in the most graceful manner. As he did so, a dog who was passing put his tail between his legs, and after 2 or 3 very weak barks, scurried off in evident fright and surprise. A man was at the same time coming along the road with a slow and pompous walk, for he was the squire of the village, who, upon seeing the strange pitcher clear the stile, was rendered almost speechless with amazement. But as soon as he saw the little legs speeding towards him, he uttered one loud exclamation of terror and fled. His hat flew one way, his cane another, and his cloak mounted into the air like wings. Being very fat, however, he had not gone far before his legs failed him, and he lay kicking in a furze bush, roaring for help. Patty could not help laughing at the sight, but the pitcher trotted on with the greatest unconcern, soon reached the cottage door to the astonishment of Patty's parents. The pitcher walked quietly into the cottage and sat down in a corner, tucking its legs carefully under it, so that no one could see them. The neighbours, therefore, who had been alarmed at the squire's account of his fright and disaster, and came to the cottage in crowds, only saw a pitcher, such as they all had at home, and put the old squire down as being a little bit out of his mind. Patty was awakened next morning by hearing a noise below, as if someone was very busy with the furniture. She heard the chairs pushed about, and presently the handle of a pail clinked down as plain as could be. So she put on her clothes and crept downstairs. She peeped cautiously through the red curtains at the bottom, and there, to her wonderful surprise, she saw, what do you think? Not any thieves, but the astonishing pitcher. And what do you think it was doing? Why, it was mopping up the red tiles of the floor as handily as if it had never done anything else all the days of its life. And more wonderful still, the fire was made and was burning brightly upon the hearth. We can imagine a pitcher of water washing the floor, but we cannot imagine it doing anything else with a fire except putting it out. But no, the fire was lighted, the kettle was on, and there it was, merrily singing a little song about breakfast being nearly ready. "Good morning, dear mistress," said the pitcher cheerfully. "You need not trouble yourself to do anything but grow and improve your mind, for from henceforth you will have but little labour to do, as I am here to do it for you." You may suppose that Patty was well pleased to hear this, for she was now growing to be a tall girl, and felt a great desire to improve herself with books, which as yet she had had very little time to do, having been so much taken up with the household cares. When Patty was left alone in the evening with the pitcher, she told him how much she was obliged to him for all he had done, and how much she had wished to learn, but did not know what to do for books, as she had read the few she already possessed many times over. "Oh, I can soon help you there," said the pitcher, "for you only have to wish, and I will yield you as much milk as you desire. You can then make butter and cheese, and go sell them at the market town, buy as many books as you like, and have something left for other purposes besides." No sooner said than done. Patty set out all the pans she had and all she could borrow from her kind neighbours, and as fast as they came the pitcher ran about and filled them, so that she soon had plenty of cream for her butter and cheese. She had only to ask, and a good neighbour lent her a churn, while the pitcher furnished a pair of arms to do the churning, and such butter was produced as had not been seen in the village for many a day. You may suppose that Patty was pleased, and as for her dear old parents, they hardly knew what to make of it all. The same good neighbour lent her a gentle horse and some baskets, and early one lovely morning she started for the market town, to which the pleased pitcher pointed out the way. He did not go with her, as he said to the people of the town were not accustomed to see brown pitchers with legs, so he should stay at home and see about making the cheese. Patty rode cheerfully on her way, looking as happy and handsome as the best farmer's daughter of them all, so everybody in the market said, and she soon sold all her butter at the very best prices of the day. And so Patty went on thriving, and doing good to everyone in need, until, in course of time, she grew into a beautiful and lovable young woman, living in comfort with her old parents in one of the prettiest cottages in the village. Everyone said that she deserved her good fortune. No one envied her. She was loved by young and old, so, as you may well believe, she was happy as the day is long. Part 3. And now a wonderful thing came to pass, which changed the whole course of Patty's simple and contented life. One evening, she was standing in her garden feeding her pigeons, when a well-dressed stranger approached the gate. After looking at her with admiration for a moment, he bowed gracefully, at the same time removing his plumed hat, and, in the politest manner, inquired the way to the next town. Patty answered him pleasantly, and as she spoke, the music of her voice and the charming modesty of her manner seemed to strike the young man with surprise and pleasure. He looked at her intently for a moment, which made Patty's eyes seek the ground in blushing confusion. Then, bowing again with greater respect than before, he proceeded slowly on his way, often looking back for another glimpse of sweet Patty. And now, as you probably guess, the handsome young stranger came again and again, although he knew his way very well indeed between the village and the neighbouring town. At last she found that it was the way to her heart he was seeking. He told her parents that he was rich, and wished to have a wife of whom everyone spoke well. He did not care how poor she might be, so that she loved him, since he had wealth enough for both, and could choose to marry when and where he pleased. You must not suppose, however, that Patty fell into the arms of the young stranger at once. He coaxed her a great deal before she consented to be his wife, as she wanted to make sure that he was as upright in character as he was handsome in appearance. The parents smiled as they looked upon the ardent and handsome lover, whom, however, they did not think a bit too good for their darling Patty, and so, in as short a time as was possible, they were happily married. Now the stranger who had married Patty was a prince in disguise, and the pretty cottage girl became a great princess, surrounded with all the splendour of her high station. Did Patty now forget her early home and her old friend, the pitcher? No, she did not, for the pitcher went with her, but her parents wished to end their days in the peaceful village where they were born. In the splendid state in which she now lived, the pitcher was as useful to her as before, though in a different way. When the poor came to the palace gate, he gave them bread and nourishing soup for their families, for which they daily blessed the kind princess, who relieved their wants. So you see, the pitcher, although now not called upon to work, still continued in the name of his mistress to do good to all around. Part 4. But, alas, the best of us cannot escape from envious hearts and wicked tongues, and so it befell with Patty. Her dream of happiness was short. Many of the wicked courtiers envied her the love of the people, to whom Patty was endeared by her gentle kindness, and they whispered slanders into the ears of the prince, her husband, who at last, I'm sorry to say, was weak enough to listen to them, for they aroused his fears by telling him that she was trying to bribe the people by her charities to rebel against him. They also said that she was served by evil spirits, and pointed to the good and innocent pitcher as a proof of their wicked tales. Alas for human weakness! The prince at last became convinced of her guilt, and although his heart ached, he had her put into one of the dungeons of the palace, and there poor Patty was left to mourn over the too easy belief of her husband in her guilt. She did not, however, mourn long, for as night came on, the prison door gently opened, and there, to her great delight, she saw the faithful pitcher with a bunch of keys in his hand. "Come," he said, "let us return to your peaceful home, and show your husband that it is his heart and not his riches that you covet. He will come back to reason and repentance when he finds he has lost you." Poor Patty followed him in deep grief, but they had not gone far in their flight when she perceived with alarm that they were followed by a band of soldiers. She screamed with fright. Part 5. "Be not alarmed, dear mistress," said the pitcher. "I will soon stop their pursuit." So saying, he bent over the side of a rock and poured out a cataract of water through the valley in which the soldiers were marching. Soon the water swelled into huge waves, which swept the soldiers from their path, and compelled them to save their lives by swimming to the nearest land, when, wet and dispirited, they soon returned to their master, the foolish prince. That night Patty slept once more beneath the sheltering roof of her parents, who, as you may suppose, received their darling with open arms. She once more found herself in her beloved garden, and the flowers, as you may believe, were often watered with her tears. It was but natural that her thoughts should wander to the home of her husband, and that she should grieve over his cruelty in return for a pure and ardent love. Hope, however, whispered to her, in the midst of her tears, that he would yet learn how false the stories were that had caused not only her unhappiness, but his also. The pitcher, too, was always at her side to give her comfort in her silent sorrow. And thus days and weeks rolled on, but no news or messenger reached her from her husband. Had he entirely abandoned her? Or did he believe her to have been swept by the torrent that had so nearly drowned his soldiers, who were too busy looking out for their own safety to notice what had become of her? She hoped that it was so, as that in a measure would excuse him, and even now he might be mourning her as lost to him forever, for surely, she thought, long ere this the evil tongues must have appeared to him in their true light. One morning she rose earlier than usual. She was restless and could not sleep. The pure air was cool and refreshing to her fevered brow. Looking sadly around her, she saw the dear old pitcher trimming the flowers just like an experienced gardener. "Good morning, dear mistress," said he, rubbing his hands cheerfully. "You are up betimes today, for the sun has hardly yet peeped into the valley. I am glad you are so early afoot. As you see, I am taking extra care with the garden, for I am expecting visitors today." "Visitors?" said Patty, with an inquiring look. "Yes, visitors," said the pitcher, from whose mouth issued a low, chuckling laugh. "I can distinctly hear footsteps in the distance, and they are coming this way. Listen, they are now near enough for mortal ears to hear." And so they were. Nearer and nearer they came. Presently the figure of a traveller, with a hood over his face, came in sight. He stopped a moment, threw back his hood, and stood, struck with amazement, for it was the prince, her husband, who believed her to be dead, drowned in the valley, after she had escaped from prison. "This," said the pitcher, "is the visitor I expected. Believing you to be dead, he has wandered in many lands to cure his grief, and at last ventured to this quiet cottage to see once more the spot where he first had the good fortune to meet you. He has bitterly grieved over the sin he has committed in believing you guilty of coveting his riches, when he alone was all your riches and your delight. That you are still alive is the reward for his sincere repentance. He finds you in your parents' home where he saw you first, regretting nothing of your past life, except the loss of the husband you loved so well." The faithful pitcher here ceased speaking. The prince rushed forward with a cry of delight, and knelt at Patty's feet and begged her forgiveness. The pitcher, like a discreet friend, placed her hand in his, and went into the cottage. The prince, now happy in his love, which had increased 100-fold, wished at once to return to his palace, and desired to send forward a messenger, so that he might bring back his recovered wife in triumph. The pitcher, upon this, came out and joined them. "Prince," said he, "spare yourself this trouble. I am here to render a last service to my mistress. Since your sincere love now leaves nothing for her to desire, the fairy who appointed me to reward her for her greatest of human virtues, self-denial, now recalls me to her water palace." Behold, as he ceased speaking, jets of sparkling water rose high in the air from his mouth, until the valley was filled by a lovely lake, upon which floated a gilded barge, manned by stout rowers in the prince's livery, and gay with flags of all colours. Patty then took an affectionate leave of her parents, and she and her husband stepped into the barge. Still the water flowed from the pitcher's mouth, until the lake grew into a mighty river, down which they floated until they came in sight of their beautiful home, standing high upon the rocks which bordered the stream. Hundreds of flags floated from the towers, and booming cannon sent forth a noisy welcome. Crowds of rejoicing people stood to receive their beloved mistress, whose kindness had long ago endeared her to their grateful hearts, and when at length they landed, the people rushed forward, happy if they even succeeded in kissing the hem of her garment. After that, Patty lived many years in peace and prosperity, but the magic pitcher was seen no more, for Patty was happy, and its loving task was done. As the story lady ceased speaking, the actors vanished from the magic circle into thin air. "Oh, I wish I could learn to tell stories like that!" exclaimed Mary Frances. "You can," said the Story King, heartily, "for you have come to the home of good storytellers. Yes, You can, my dear, because you love stories," said the Story Queen. "And for that reason you will always be young," added the Story King, "for good storytellers never grow old." "It seems too good to be true, the Story Lady is so wonderful," returned Mary Frances. This outspoken admiration pleased the Story People very much, for they were very proud of their Story Lady. Now the reader-writer folded the copies of the 5 stories, stepped up with a funny little bow, and handed them to their guest as before. And that was the end of the second day. End of section 24. Recording by Alan Lawley.
Section number 25 of the Mary Frances Story Book. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Linda Marie Nielsen, Vancouver, BC. The Mary Frances Story Book by Jane Eyre Fryer. The Stories of the Third Day. Sir Galahad. King Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table. When the Story People were assembled on the third day, the Story Lady began. In the early days of Britain there lived a noble king, Arthur, and his brave knights of the Round Table. The king and his knights were famous for their feats of arms, their deeds of valor, and their many adventures. Among them none was nobler and braver than King Arthur, until Galahad came. But Galahad surpassed them all. He accomplished the feat in which so many failed. He conquered himself, as you shall hear. Now King Arthur held his court 3 times a year, at Christmas, at Easter, and at Pentecost, in the lovely town of Camelot. Here stood Camelot Castle, with its high towers and great jousting field in the meadow by the river, where the knights held their tournaments and performed their feats of arms. At these times all the brave knights of Christendom flocked to Camelot, and the bravest were chosen to sit at the Round Table, where they feasted, told their adventures, and planned new deeds of valor. Here King Arthur would charge them to commit no murder, outrage, or treason; also to be courteous and never to refuse mercy; always to defend women and children on pain of death, and never to fight in a wrong quarrel for law or worldly goods. And to this he pledged both old and young every year at the high feast of Pentecost. In the center of the great hall of the castle, with its lofty arches and high windows, stood the Round Table. Merlin, the magician, so the tale goes, made the Round Table in token of the roundness of the world. For all the bravest of the world, Christian and heathen, resort to the Round Table, and when they are chosen to be of that company, they think themselves more happy and more in honor than if they had gotten half the world. When Merlin had made this wonderful table, he said that, by the knights who sat about it, the truth of the Holy Grail should be well known. Now, the Holy Grail was the cup which was supposed to have been used by our Saviour at the Last Supper, and was said to have been brought into Britain by Joseph of Arimathea. After a time, through the sin of those who had charge of it, this holy vessel became lost, and the knights of the Round Table sought to recover it. But only a knight who was perfectly blameless in thought, word, and act could hope to succeed. When Merlin was asked who was best fitted for this quest, he said that 3 blameless knights could achieve it, and that one of the 3 should surpass his father as much as the lion surpasses the leopard, both in strength and boldness. Those who heard Merlin say this, said, "Since there is to be such a knight, you should make by your skill a seat for him to sit in." Merlin answered that he would do this, and so he made the Perilous Seat, in which no man dare sit on pain of being hurt, except the knight for whom the seat was made. This knight was Sir Galahad, of whom the poet Tennyson writes: "My good sword carves the casques of men, My tough lance trusteth sure, My strength is as the strength of 10, Because my heart is pure." The tales themselves are from an old book, Le Morte d'Arthur, written by Sir Thomas Malory in the 15th century. Galahad receives the order of knighthood. One day at Pentecost, when the tables were set, ready for the feasting to begin, there rode into the great hall of the castle a fair gentlewoman on horseback, her horse covered with sweat and foam. Quickly alighting, she came to King Arthur, who was surrounded by his knights, and saluted him. "Damsel, God bless you," said the king. "Sir," said she, "show me where Sir Launcelot is." "There you may see him," said the king, pointing to the knight. She went to Sir Launcelot and said, "Sir Launcelot, I salute you and require that you come with me." "What is your will with me?" asked Sir Launcelot. "You shall soon know and understand," she replied. "Well," said he, "I will gladly go with you." Sir Launcelot bade his squire saddle his horse and bring his armor. The queen then came to Sir Launcelot and asked in surprise, "Will you leave us at the high feast?" The gentlewoman answered for him, "Madam, he shall be with you again to morrow at midday." So Sir Launcelot departed with the gentlewoman and rode into a great forest till he came to an abbey. Where the squire opened the gates he entered and descended from his horse, and there met two of his cousins, Sir Bors and Sir Lionel, who were very glad to see him. "Sir," said Sir Bors, "what adventure brings you here? We thought to see you at Camelot to morrow." "A gentlewoman brought me here," said Sir Launcelot, "but I know not the cause." While they were talking, 12 nuns came in, bringing with them Galahad, a youth so handsome and well made that scarcely in the world might men find his match, and all the ladies wept. "Sir," said one of the ladies, "we bring here your son, whom we have nourished for you, and we pray you now to make him a knight, for he could not receive the order of knighthood from a worthier man's hand." Sir Launcelot looked at the young squire and thought that, for his age, he had never seen so fine a man. "Is this your own desire?" he asked. "Yes," replied his son. "Then you shall receive the high order of knighthood to morrow," said Sir Launcelot. Early in the morning, at Galahad's desire, he made him a knight, and said, "God make him a good man, for he is as handsome as any man that lives." This he did in the presence of his two cousins and the ladies of the abbey. "Now, fair sir," said he, "will you come with me to the court of King Arthur?" "Sir," said Sir Galahad, "I cannot go with you at this time, but shortly I will come." Sir Launcelot then departed with his cousins and returned to Camelot, and the king and queen and all the knights were exceeding glad to see them. The Adventure of the Sword in the Stone. When the king and his knights entered the great hall for the feast, they were surprised to see on the seats about the round table their names in letters of gold, which told where each one ought to sit. When they came to the perilous seat, they saw letters newly written which said, 454 winters have now passed since the birth of our Lord, and this seat ought to be filled. They all said, "This is a strange and marvelous thing." Sir Launcelot then counted the time, and said, "It seems to me this seat ought to be filled today, for this is the feast of Pentecost, after the 454 year, and if it please all here, let no one see these words till he arrives who ought to achieve this adventure." Then they took a silken cloth and covered the letters in the perilous seat, and the king ordered the dinner to be served. "Sir," said Sir Kay, the steward, "if you go now to dinner, you will break an old custom of your court, for you never sit down on this day until you have seen some adventure." "You speak the truth," said King Arthur, "but I was so glad to see Sir Launcelot and his cousins that I forgot the custom." While they were still speaking, a squire came in and said to the king, "Sir, I bring you marvelous tidings." "What are they?" he asked. "Sir, I saw in the river below a great stone floating on the water, and in it a sword sticking." "Then," said the king, "I will see that marvel." The knights went with him down to the river, and saw there a stone of red marble floating, like a great millstone, and in the middle was stuck a beautiful sword, in the handle of which were words formed of precious stones set in gold, which said, "Never shall man draw me out, save the one by whose side I ought to hang, and he shall be the best knight of the world." When the king read the letters, he said to Sir Launcelot, "Fair sir, this sword ought to be yours, for I am sure you are the best knight of the world." "Sir," answered Sir Launcelot soberly, "it is not my sword, nor am I bold enough to grasp it, for it ought not to hang by my side. Also, whoever attempts to draw it and fails, will receive a wound and will not live long after. And I am sure you must know that to day the adventures of the Holy Grail will begin." "Now, fair nephew," said the king to Sir Gawain, "attempt it once for me." "Sir," said Sir Gawain, "I will obey your command." Immediately he grasped the sword by the handle, but could not stir it. "I thank you," said King Arthur. "Sir Gawain," said Sir Launcelot, "this sword will one day hurt you so sorely that you will wish you had never put your hand to it for the best castle of the realm." "Sir," said Sir Gawain, "I might not resist my uncle's command." When King Arthur heard this he was sorry, and then he bade Sir Percival to try it, who said that he would gladly, to bear Sir Gawain company. Thereupon he took hold of the sword and drew it strongly, but he could not even move it. After that there was no one who was bold enough to attempt it. "Now you may go to dinner," said Sir Kay, "for you have seen a marvelous adventure." Sir Galahad sits in the perilous seat. The king and all the knights then returned to the castle, and each knight sat in his own place at the table, and the young men who were not knights served them. When all were served and all the seats were filled, except the perilous seat, a strange thing happened. For all the windows and doors of the castle shut by themselves, yet, for all that, the hall was not greatly darkened. King Arthur was the first to speak. "Fair comrades," he said, "we have seen marvels to day, but methinks ere night we shall see still greater marvels." Even while he was speaking, an old man came in, clothed all in white, and none of the knights knew who he was or where he came from. With him was a young knight in red armor, without sword or shield, but an empty scabbard hung by his side. "Peace be with you, gentlemen," said the old man. Then to King Arthur, "Sir, I bring you a young knight who is of the king's lineage, and of the kindred of Joseph of Arimathea. Therefore the marvels of this court and of strange countries shall be fully accomplished." The king was truly glad to hear this, and said, "Sir, you are heartily welcome, and the young knight with you." When the young knight had taken off his armor, he stood in a coat of red silk, and the old man put on his shoulder a mantle furred with fine ermine, and said, "Sir, follow me." Then he led the way to the Perilous Seat, beneath which sat Sir Launcelot, and then lifted up the cloth and found new letters which said, "This is the seat of Sir Galahad, the good knight." "Sir," said the old man, "know well this place is yours." Sir Galahad sat down safely in the Perilous Seat, and then said to his guide, "Sir, you may now go your way, for you have done as you were commanded to do, and recommend me to my grandfather, King Perilous, and say that I shall come to see him as soon as I may." When the old man departed 20 squires met him, and they took their horses and rode away. The knights of the Round Table wondered greatly at Sir Galahad, because he was so youthful, and because he dared to sit in the Perilous Seat, and they did not know where he was from, save from God, and they said, "This is he by whom the Holy Grail shall be achieved, for no man ever before sat there unhurt." Sir Launcelot looked at his son with great joy, and Sir Bors said to his comrades, "Upon pain of my life, this young knight shall come to great honor." There was so much noise in the hall that the queen heard it, and she had a great desire to see the knight who dared such an adventure. When dinner was done, the king rose and went to Sir Galahad's seat, and lifted the cloth and read his name. Then he showed it to Sir Gawain, and said, "Fair nephew, now we have among us the blameless knight who will bring honor to us all, and upon pain of my life he shall achieve the Holy Grail, as Sir Launcelot has given us to understand." King Arthur then came to Sir Galahad and said, "Sir, you are welcome, for you shall move many good knights to seek the Holy Grail, and you shall achieve what no other knight has been able to accomplish." Sir Galahad wins the sword of Balin le Savage. The king then took Sir Galahad by the hand, and went down to the river to show him the adventure of the stone, and the queen and many ladies went with them and saw the stone floating in the water. "Sir," said the king to him, "here is a great marvel as ever I saw, and right good knights have attempted it and failed." "Sir," answered Sir Galahad, "that is no marvel, for the adventure is not theirs, but mine, and because of this sword I brought none with me, for its empty scabbard hangs by my side." Then he grasped the sword quickly, and drew it out of the stone, and put it in his scabbard, and said, "Now it goes better than it did before." "Sir," said the king, "a shield also God shall send you." "Now," said Sir Galahad, "I have the sword that once belonged to the good knight, Sir Balin le Savage. With this sword he slew his brother Balin, and that was a great pity, for neither knew that he fought his brother until wounded to death. With that they saw a lady on a white horse riding along the river bank toward them. She saluted the king and queen, and asked for Sir Launcelot. "I am here, fair lady," said Sir Launcelot. Then she said, weeping, "Your great doings are changed since this morning." "Damsel, why do you say so?" demanded Sir Launcelot. "I say truth," said she, "for you were to day the best knight in the world; but whoever said so now would be proved a liar. There is one better than you, for you dared not grasp the sword. Therefore, I ask you to remember that you are no longer the best knight in the world." "As to that," said he, "I know well I was never the best." "Yes," said the damsel, "you were, and are yet of any sinful man of the world; and, sir," she said to the king, "Næsen, the hermit, sends word of the greatest honor that ever befell king in Britain. For to day the Holy Grail shall appear to thee and all thy comrades of the Round Table." Having thus spoken, the damsel took her leave and departed the same way that she came. "Now," said the king, "I am sure that all of you who sit at the Round Table will set out in quest of the Holy Grail, and I shall never see you together again. Therefore let us go to the meadow of Camelot and hold a tournament, so that after your death men may say that we were all together on this day." To this they all agreed, and assembled with their arms in the jousting field. Now the king wished to prove Sir Galahad and to see what he would do. At the king's request, he put on his armor, but would not take a shield. Then Sir Gawain begged him to take a spear, which he did, and the queen sat in a tower with all her ladies to see the tournament. Then Sir Galahad took his place in the field, and began to break marvelously the spears of those who rode against him, so that men wondered. In short, while he overthrew and unhorsed many of the good knights of the Round Table, save two, Sir Launcelot and Sir Percival. Then the king made Sir Galahad alight from his horse, and unlace his helmet, so that Queen Guinevere might see him closely. When she saw him, she said, "Truly, he is the son of Sir Launcelot, for never did two men more resemble each other. It is no wonder that he has great valor." A lady who stood by said, "Madam, ought he of right to be so good a knight?" "Yes," said she, "for he comes of the best knights in the world, and of the highest lineage." Section 26, of the Mary Frances Storybook. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Linda Marie Nielsen, Vancouver, BC. The Mary Frances Storybook by Jane Eyre Fryer. Sir Galahad continued. The Knights of the Round Table set out in quest of the Holy Grail. The king and all his knights then left the jousting field, and rode to Camelot Church to even song, and after that they went home to supper. At supper, as each knight sat in his own place at the Round Table, there arose a great storm, and the crackling and crying of the thunder was so terrible that they thought the roof and walls of the castle were breaking apart. In the midst of the blast, a sunbeam entered the great window, 7 times whiter than the light of day. Then every knight seemed fairer than his comrades had ever seen him, and no one dared speak for a long while, but all looked at each other as if they had been dumb. Then there entered on the sunbeam the Holy Grail, but it was covered with a white silken cloth, so that no one could see it or who bore it. Then the hall was filled with sweet odors, and every knight had such meat and drink as he liked best. And when the Holy Grail had been borne through the hall, it departed as suddenly as it came, and the marvelous light with it, but no one knew where. When they had breath to speak, the king gave thanks. "Certainly," said he, "we ought greatly to thank our Lord for what he has shown us to day at this high feast of Pentecost." "Now," said Sir Gawain, "we have been served to day with the food we liked best, but are sorry that we did not see the Holy Grail uncovered. Therefore, I will here make a vow to set forth on its quest to morrow to be gone a year and a day, or longer if need be, and I shall not return till I have seen it more openly than to day. If I do not find it, I shall return again, if it be not contrary to the will of our Lord." When the knights of the Round Table heard this, the most part of them rose and made the same vow. But King Arthur was greatly displeased, for he well knew that they might not break their vows. "Alas," said he, "your vows will nearly slay me. They will rob me of the bravest comrades and the truest knights ever seen together in any realm, and I foresee that we shall never meet in fellowship again, for many of you that have loved as well as my life will die in this quest." With that the tears came into his eyes, and he said, "Sir Gawain, Sir Gawain, you have given me great sorrow, for I much doubt that my true fellowship shall ever meet here again." "Ah," said Sir Launcelot, "comfort yourself. It will bring us greater honor than if we had died in any other quest, for of death we are sure." "Ah, Sir Launcelot," said the king, "the great love I have had for you all the days of my life makes me say such sorrowful words, for Christian king never had so many worthy men at his table as I have had at the Round Table to day." When the queen and her gentlewomen heard these things, they were filled with sorrow, for their knights held them in greatest honor and affection. But the queen was the most sorely grieved of all. "I marvel," said she, "that the king will permit them to leave him." Thus all the court was troubled that night, and many of the ladies desired to accompany their husbands; but the old knight arose and said this could not be, for in so high and dangerous a service they must go forth alone. After a while they all went to rest, and Sir Galahad was put to bed in the king's own chamber. As soon as it was daylight the king arose, for he had no sleep that night for sorrow. He went at once to Sir Gawain and Sir Launcelot and said again, "Ah, Sir Gawain, Sir Gawain, you have betrayed me, for my court will never be restored, but you will never be as sorry for me as I am for you." With that the tears began to run down his face, and he said, "Ah, knight, Sir Launcelot, I ask that you counsel me, for I wish this quest to be undone, and it can be." "Sir," said Sir Launcelot, "you saw yesterday that many worthy knights were sworn to this quest, and they cannot break their vows." "That I know well," said the king, "but my grief at their going is so great that no joy will ever heal it." After the king had gone, the two knights ordered their squires to bring their arms, and when they were armed they joined their comrades, and all went to the church to hear their service. After the service was over, the king took count of those who had taken the vow to search for the Holy Grail, and found that there were 150, all knights of the Round Table. When they had bidden the queen and their ladies farewell, they put on their helmets and were ready to set forth, and there was weeping and great sorrow. Then the queen departed to her chamber to hide her grief. So the knights mounted their horses and rode through the streets of Camelot, and there was much weeping of both rich and poor, and the king turned away, for he could not speak for weeping. After leaving the town, the men at arms rode all day, and toward evening arrived at a castle called Vagon. The lord of the castle was a good old man, and he opened his gates and made them welcome and gave them good cheer, and there they passed the night. In the morning they all agreed that they should separate, so, bidding each other farewell, they departed, and each knight took the way that pleased him best. Sir Galahad finds a white shield with a red cross. Now Sir Galahad rode 4 days without adventure, for as yet he had no shield. On the 4th day, towards evening, he arrived at a white abbey, where he was received with great honor. There he found 2 knights of the Round Table, Sir Badgemagus and Sir Uwaine, who were delighted to see him, and they went to supper together. "Sirs," said Sir Galahad, "what adventure brought you here?" "Sir," they answered, "we are told there is a shield in this place, and whoever wears it about his neck will be wounded to death within 3 days, or else be maimed forever." "Ah, sir," said Sir Badgemagus, "I shall wear it to morrow, and attempt this strange adventure." "By my faith!" cried Sir Galahad. "Sir," said Sir Badgemagus, "if I do not achieve the adventure of the shield, you should try it, for I am sure you shall not fail." "Sir," said Sir Galahad, "I agree right well to that, for I have no shield." The next day when Sir Badgemagus inquired for the shield, a monk led him behind the altar, where the shield hung as white as snow, but in the center was a red cross. "Sir," said the monk, "no knight ought to hang this shield about his neck, unless he be the worthiest in the world. Therefore I counsel you to be well advised." "Well," said Sir Badgemagus, "I know I am not the worthiest knight in the world, yet I shall attempt to wear it." He then took the shield and said to Sir Galahad, "If it please you, I pray you remain here till you know how I succeed." "I shall await you here," said he. After riding 2 miles, Sir Badgemagus and his squire came to a hermit's house, from which a goodly knight rode forth to meet him. This knight was in a white armor, horse and all, and he came as fast as his horse might run, with his spear in rest. Sir Badgemagus ran against him with such violence that he broke his spear upon the white knight's shield, but the other struck him so hard that he broke his armor, pierced him through the shoulder, and threw him from his horse. With that the white knight alighted and took the white shield from him, saying, "Knight, thou hast done a foolish act, for this shield ought not be borne save by one that shall have no equal." Then he said to the wounded knight's squire, Bear this shield to the good knight, Sir Galahad, and greet him well for me." "Sir," said the squire, "what is your name?" "Take no heed of my name," said the white knight. "It is not for you to know, nor any earthly man." "Now, fair sir," said the squire, "tell me why this shield cannot be borne without injury to the bearer." "Now, since you ask me," said he, "this shield belongs to no man but Sir Galahad." Then he set the wounded man on his horse, and brought him to the hermit's house, and laid him gently in a bed, where his wound was dressed. There he lay a long time, and hardly escaped with his life. "Sir Galahad," said the squire on his return, "the knight who wounded Sir Badgemagus sends you greeting, and bids you bear this shield, for through it great adventures shall befall." "Now blessed be God and fortune," said Sir Galahad. He then put on his armor, mounted his horse, hung the shield about his neck, and commended them to God. Sir Gawain said that if it pleased him, he would accompany him. "Sir," said Sir Galahad, "that cannot be, for I must ride alone." After a while he came to the hermit's house, where he met the white knight and saluted him courteously. "Sir," said he, "this shield must have seen many marvelous things." "Sir," said the knight, "the legend says that 30 years after the crucifixion, Joseph of Arimathea, the gentle knight who took down our Lord from the cross, departed from Jerusalem and his people with him, and they came to a city called Sarras. Now, Evelake, the king of Sarras, had a war against the Saracens. Joseph told the king that he would be defeated and slain unless he gave up his belief of the old law and believed in the new. He then showed him the right belief, to which he agreed with all his heart, and this white shield was made for Evelake in the name of him who died on the cross. After he had overcome his enemies, with the help of this shield, he was baptized and, for the most part, all the people of the city. Soon after this Joseph departed from Sarras and Evelake with him, and, so the tale goes, Joseph carried the holy vessel and Evelake the shield, till, by good fortune, they came into the land of Britain. In due time Joseph lay on his death bed, and Evelake was full of sorrow, and said, "For thy love I left my country. Now, since thou art going out of the world, leave me some token of remembrance." "I will do that gladly," said Joseph. "Bring me the shield." Now Joseph made a cross on this shield, with his own blood, and said, "Now you may know that I love you, for when you see this cross you shall think of me, for it shall always be as clear as it is now. And no man shall bear this shield without injury, except the good knight Sir Galahad, who shall do many marvelous things. Now know, Sir Galahad, that this is the day set for you to have this shield." When he had thus spoken, the white knight vanished from his sight. Sir Launcelot and Sir Percival attack Sir Galahad. Thus equipped with a shield, Sir Galahad set out on his quest, and, after many adventures, found himself in a vast forest. There he saw Sir Launcelot and Sir Percival riding along, but neither knew him, for he had newly disguised himself. Sir Launcelot, his father, at once put his spear in rest and rode at his son, Sir Galahad, who struck him hard in his own defense that he threw both horse and man. Then he drew his sword to defend himself against Sir Percival, who now attacked him. He dealt him such a blow that it broke his cap of steel, and, if the sword had not swerved, Sir Percival might have been slain. As it was, he fell out of his saddle. These encounters took place near the hermitage of a lady who was a recluse. When she saw Sir Galahad ride, she said, "God be with you, the best knight of the world." Then she cried aloud, so that Sir Launcelot and Sir Percival might hear, "Ah, certainly, if those two knights had known thee as well as I do, they would not have dared the encounter." When Sir Galahad heard her say this, he was much afraid of being known. So he put spurs to his horse and rode away at a great pace. Then both knights knew that it was Sir Galahad, and quickly mounted their horses and rode after him. But he was soon out of their sight, and they turned back with heavy hearts. "Let us make inquiry of yonder recluse," said Sir Percival. "Do as you please," said Sir Launcelot, and then rode headlong, keeping no path, but as wild adventure led him, and was soon lost in the depths of the forest. But Sir Percival went to the door of the recluse, who asked what he wished. "Madam," he replied, "I am a knight of King Arthur's court, Sir Percival de Galis. Do you know the knight with the white shield?" When the recluse heard his name, she was exceedingly glad, for she greatly loved him, as she had a right to do, for she was an aunt of his whom he had never seen. "Sir," said she, "why would you know?" "Truly, madam," said he, "that I may fight with him, for I am ashamed of my defeat." "Ah, Sir Percival," said she, "I see that you have a great will to be slain as your father was through recklessness." "Madam," said he, "it seems by your words that you know me." "Yes," said she, "I ought to know you, for I am your aunt." Then Sir Percival wept when he knew who she was. "Ah, fair nephew," said she, "when have you heard from your mother?" "Truly," said he, "not in a great while, but I often dreamt of her in my sleep." "Fair nephew," said she, "your mother is dead, for after you set out on this quest she fell into such sorrow that she soon died." "Now may God have mercy on her soul," said he sadly, "for I was sorely afraid of it, but we all change our life. Now tell me, fair aunt, was that knight he who bore the red arms of Pentecost?" "That is he," said his aunt, "but he is without equal, for he works by miracle, and cannot be overcome by the hands of any earthly man." "Now, madam," said he, "since I know this, I will never have to do with Sir Galahad except by way of kindness. Tell me how I may find him, for I would much love his company." "Fair nephew," said she, "you must ride to the castle of Guth, where his first cousin lives, and there you may lodge for the night. If you get no word of him there, ride straight to the castle of Carbach, where the crippled king lives, and there you will hear tidings." Sir Percival left his aunt sorrowing, and rode till evensong, when he heard a clock strike. Then he came upon a castle, closed in with high walls and deep ditches, and knocked at the gate, but could not get word of Sir Galahad. There he passed the night, and in the morning departed and rode till the hour of noon. In a valley he overtook a company of about 20 men at arms, who bore a dead knight upon a hearse. When they saw Sir Percival, they asked him who he was. "A knight of King Arthur's court," he answered. Then they cried all at once, "Kill him!" Straightway Sir Percival struck the first to the ground and his horse upon him. Then 7 of them at once ran at him and threw him and slew his horse. Now, had not the good knight Sir Galahad happened by adventure in those parts, they would have killed or captured Sir Percival instantly. But when he saw so many knights attacking one man, he cried, "Spare that knight's life!" With that he charged the 20 men at arms as fast as his horse might drive with spear at rest, and hurled the foremost horse and man to the ground. When his spear was broken, he seized his sword and struck out right and left, so that it was a marvel to see. At every blow he cut one down or wounded him, so that the rest became frightened and fled into a thick forest, and Sir Galahad followed hard after them. When Sir Percival saw him chase them so, he knew it was Sir Galahad and wept with rage, for his horse was dead. He ran after him afoot, crying for him to stop while he thanked him. But Sir Galahad rode fast after the knights he was chasing, and was soon out of sight. And as fast as he could, Sir Percival went after him on foot, crying, but could not overtake him. The Adventure of the Gentlewoman, the Mystery Ship, and the Sword of the Strange Belt. Now, says the tale, when Sir Galahad had rescued Sir Percival, he went into a vast forest, where he rode many journeys and found many adventures. One day, after many weary hours on horseback, as night was falling, he arrived at a lonely hermitage and knocked. The good man was very glad to welcome a knight errant and to hear his tales, and so they talked till late. Soon after they had gone to rest, there was a knocking at the door. When the hermit asked who was there, a voice said, "I am a gentlewoman who would speak with the knight that is with you." When the good man awoke Sir Galahad and bade him arise and speak with the gentlewoman, who, he said, seems to have great need of you. So Sir Galahad arose and asked her wish. "Sir Galahad," said she, "I wish you to arm yourself, mount your horse, and follow me, and I will show you within 3 days the highest adventure that any knight ever saw." Sir Galahad took his arms at once, mounted his horse, commended himself to God, and bade the gentlewoman go, and he would follow where she wished. The damsel rode as fast as her horse would gallop that night, and all the next day till they came within reach of the sea. Toward night they halted at a castle that was enclosed with running water and high walls. Here Sir Galahad had great welcome, for the lady of the castle was the damsel's lady. When he was unarmed, the damsel said to the lady, "Madam, shall we lodge here to night?" "No," said she, "but only till he has dined and slept a little." So he ate and slept till the maid called him, and then armed himself by torchlight. When the maid and he were both mounted, they left the castle and rode till they reached the seaside. There they found in the darkness a ship awaiting them, and 2 voices cried from on shipboard, "Welcome, Sir Galahad! We have long waited for you." When he heard these words, he asked them who they were. "Sir," said the damsel, "leave your horse here, and I shall leave mine." When they entered the ship, he was welcomed with great joy by those whose voices he had heard, who were none other than Sir Bors and Sir Percival, and he was exceeding glad of their company. As soon as they were on board, the wind arose and drove them through the sea. After a while morning dawned, and Sir Galahad took off his helmet and his sword, and asked his comrades where the ship was from. "Truly," said they, "you know as well as we, but of God's grace." Then they told of their adventures since they last parted, and of their great temptations. "Truly," said Sir Galahad, "you are much indebted to God for escaping great dangers, and had it not been for this gentlewoman, I should not have come here, for I never thought to find you in this strange country." "Ah, Sir Galahad," said Sir Bors, "if your father, Sir Launcelot, were here, it seems to me we should lack nothing." "That may not be," said he, "except it please our Lord." Now, neither Sir Percival nor Sir Bors knew the gentlewoman, for she was veiled. But this time the ship was far distant from the land of Britain, and by chance had arrived between two great rocks, which were exceeding dangerous. Neither could they land, for there was a great whirlpool of the sea. After buffeting about, they escaped the danger and came into a calmer sea, and there saw another ship at anchor to which they might go in safety. "Let us go there," said the gentlewoman, "and we shall see adventures if our Lord wills." When they came alongside, they found a fine ship, but no one appeared to be on board. On the stern they read these strange and dreadful words: "Whoever enters this ship must be steadfast in his belief, for I am Faith. Therefore beware, for if thou fail, I shall not help thee." Then the gentlewoman asked, "Do you know who I am?" "Truly," said Percival, "I do not know you." "Know well," said she, "I am your sister, the daughter of King Pellinore. Therefore you are the man in the world I most like. If you are not in perfect belief, and enter the ship, you will perish, for it will suffer no sin in it." Now when Sir Percival knew she was his sister, he was very glad, and said, "Fair sister, I shall enter therein, for if I be worthless or an untrue knight, there shall I perish." Without further parley, Sir Galahad stepped on board the strange ship, followed by the gentlewoman, Sir Bors, and Sir Percival. The fittings were so rich and perfect that they wondered, for they had never seen the like. In the cabin in the midst of the ship there stood a beautiful bed with a coverlet of fine silk, and on it at the foot lay a great sword of marvelous beauty, which was drawn out of its scabbard half a foot and more, as if one had tried to draw it and could not. "Here is a mystery!" cried Sir Percival. "I shall attempt to handle the sword." So he tried to grasp it, but try as he might he could not. "Now, by my faith," said he, "I have failed." Sir Bors also set his hand to the sword and failed. Sir Galahad looked at it more closely, and saw on it letters as red as blood which said: "Let him who would draw me from my scabbard see that he be bolder than other men, for who draweth me shall not escape injury to his body or wounding unto death." "By my faith," said Sir Galahad, "I would like to draw this sword out of its scabbard, but the penalty is so great that I shall not try it." "Sir," said the gentlewoman, "know that all men are warned against drawing this sword, save you." As they looked closer, they saw that the sword belt was made of hempen cord of such poor account that it did not seem strong enough to bear so heavy a weight. The scabbard was of serpent's skin, and on it were letters of gold and silver, which said: "Whoever bears me as I ought to be borne should be bolder than other men. For the body of him by whose side I ought to hang shall not suffer shame while he wears this belt, and no one shall dare change this belt except a maid who is a king's daughter." "Sir," said the gentlewoman to Sir Galahad, "there was a king named Pelleas, the maimed king, who, while he was able to ride, strongly supported Christendom and the Holy Church. Upon a day he hunted in a wood which bordered the sea, and at last he lost his hounds and his knights, and found this ship. When he saw the letters he entered for he was right perfect in life. Here he found this sword and drew it out as far as you now see. With that there entered a spear and wounded him in both his thighs. His wounds have never healed, and never shall until we come to him. Thus," said she, "was not Pelleas, your grandfather, maimed for his boldness?" "By my faith," said Sir Galahad. Then, as they stood looking at the bed in wonder, Sir Percival lifted the coverlet and found a writing which told of the ship, by whom it was made, and how it came there; but that does not belong to this tale. "Now," said Sir Galahad, "where shall we find the maid who shall make a belt strong enough to carry this sword?" "Fair sir," said Sir Percival's sister, "do not fear, for I shall show you a belt fit for such a sword." She then opened a box and took out a belt, wrought with golden threads, and set with precious stones, and a rich buckle of gold. "Lo, sirs," said she, "here is a belt that ought to bear this sword, for the greatest part of it is woven of my own hair, which I loved full well when I was a woman of the world; but as soon as I knew this adventure was appointed to me, I clipped off my hair and made this belt." "We are truly grateful," said Sir Bors, "for without your help we should have endured much suffering." The gentlewoman then put the new belt on the sword. "Now," said the three knights, "what is the name of the sword, and what shall we call it?" "Truly," said she, "the sword of the strange belt." They then said to Sir Galahad, "We pray you gird yourself with the sword, which hath been so long desired in the land of Britain." "Now let me begin," said Sir Galahad, "to grip the sword to give you courage; but know that it belongs to me no more than it does to you." He then gripped it with his fingers and drew it forth, and Sir Percival's sister girded him with the sword. "Now I care not if I die," said she, "for I have made thee now the worthiest knight in the world." "Fair damsel," said Sir Galahad, "you have done so much, that I shall be your knight all the days of my life." End of Project Gutenberg EBook of Vancouver, BC